in a bit.
Everybody's cruising pretty good, so we're working right up to the last second before the team introduction.
Yeah, you got to stay busy. All right, well, I'll give it a few minutes for everybody to roll in. Um, Briefly, I'm going to do the intro here and just kind of introduce the team and then touch on some of the high points of the project. And then I'll hand it off to Karen and Beta and Sam to dive into some of the more specifics of all the hoops we had to jump through to get this one through the door. Still in construction now, but it's getting there. Beta, we
Is
have a view of your face and the it's switched. We had to do the back of your head to you.
I'm just everywhere, apparently.
All right, so on this one, unfortunately, the whole project's not in Revit on the interior side, so I can't do a really cool 3D tour of it. But we do have some pictures and a couple renderings that I'll jump through. But we're going to focus on some of the unique things to do with the project. It's a pretty extravagant one, a pretty expensive one, and a pretty large one. So it should be a cool view for some of our commercial compatriots who might not know some of the crazy things we deal with on these high-end residential ones. I can see more people populating through. For everybody hopping on, I'm going to give it a few more minutes so we don't sit in awkward silence. Just waiting for everybody else to get in so I don't have to repeat myself. Jim, that's you in New York. And no,
it? No, no. This is
Sinatra, I meant in New
oh,
York.
sorry.
The horns heads in the back, the skull gives you away. I bet in the New York office they don't have any taxidermy types lying around. Bravado. All right, 2 more minutes and I'll get started. All right. Close enough. Okay, so briefly, I think everybody knows who I am, but I'm Sam Mashuli. I run a 7-person team out of the Middletown office, and we focus on high-end residential projects as well as similarly high-end commercial resort projects all over the country, but specifically on the East Coast. I'm going to briefly introduce the team and some of the high points of the project that we're going to walk through, and then I'll hand it over to Sam and Karen and Heather to kind of do a deeper dive into some of their trades that we've done there. I mentioned this a second ago, but I'll say it again for those getting on there. Unfortunately, the project's not fully 3D and Revit on the interior side, so I can't take you on a really cool 3D dive through it, but we do have some renderings and some pictures to kind of establish some of the crazy things that we've been doing over there. When Allison approached us with this opportunity to get the presentation, we decided on high-end residential to give some people, particularly in the commercial world, a peek into some of the crazy and unique things that we do on the high-end residential side. So we'll try to dive into those and highlight them a bit. And I'll just get started with the intros from left to right in this beautiful picture. All the way to the left is our newest hire, Dan, a mechanical engineer, followed by our lead electrical engineer in Heather. Karen's project manager and a mechanical engineer. The unreasonably good-looking gentleman in the middle is the fearless leader, followed by an electrical engineer in Beta, our senior mechanical, and Sam Dunwoody. And the gentleman in the festive hat is mechanical Jared. So when we decided to do a residential project for no particular reason at all, we decided to focus on a little apartment we've been working on in New York for the past few years. So this apartment is for a very, we'll say, well-known and elite and wealthy client that we can't mention because it's all locked up in non-disclosure agreements. But the apartment is on Fifth Avenue. I think everyone knows where that is, but more specifically, it is at 212 Fifth Avenue, directly across from Madison Park in Manhattan on the Lower East Side. So it's in a very nice area. It's a 4-story penthouse at the top of a 24-story building. So it's floors 19 through 23. It's a landmark building, meaning it's a historic building. So through all the hoops that we've had to jump through and so forth on this project, we couldn't change the look of it from the outside really at all. The apartment is about 23,000 square feet of conditioned space, so just a tiny little one, and another 4,500 square feet or so of terrace on the outside. The terrace was very important to the client, and I actually sold the apartment for him. We'll get into more of that later. But it's also very private because the terrace is walled in with crenellated walls from like 15 to 20 feet high. So while he has the ability to kind of feel like he's completely outside, it's also very private because security is very important to the client. So the apartment itself, like I said, at 20,000 square feet, he purchased the main floors for maybe about $60 million and then bought another floor mostly for the purpose of moving around some building risers and so forth so as to not affect the ceiling heights in his main floors. The project will probably come in somewhere around $145 million. I expect the client will be there maybe 4 to 6 weeks out of the year. There are 9 bedrooms, 9 half baths, and 12 full bathrooms. Each one of the bathrooms is decked out in floor to ceiling, several inches of marble and stone and crazy things like that. Each one worth more than my house. The master bedroom suite, which we'll show you in a bit, is probably, I think, 3,000 square feet or so, complete with a panic room, a dedicated cooling system to boost it down to 65 degrees in a period of 2 hours, and the highest level ballistic bulletproof glass that you can buy. The building systems were originally a 4-pipe system with boilers and chillers in the basement and cooling towers on the roof. When I did the initial walkthrough, it became clear to me that the building systems could not be trusted, and I had just lived hell at 432 Park, and I don't trust buildings providing chilled water temperature. So we disconnected essentially from all building systems that we could, and we put in our own systems. We have 800 MVH of air source VRF that we brought 800 amps of 3-phase power up through 20 occupied stories to get there. I'm sure Heather will touch more on that later. And we squeezed it all into the mechanical roof area at the very top because we were not allowed to put anything anywhere near the terrace because it was so important to the client. We also have 1.5 million BTUs of gas-fired boilers with redundancy because every square inch of this apartment that's not covered by carpet has hydronic radiant floor. And we had a waterproof every floor like a bathtub for the building to allow us to do that. The entire apartment was gutted. Every wall that wasn't structurally relevant and several that were very structurally relevant were completely removed. There's something around a dozen plumbing risers, obviously because it's a whole apartment building. Those risers didn't fit with the architect's vision, so we moved every single one of them. Similarly, there's a kitchen exhaust fan going throughout the entire apartment and a bathroom exhaust fan that similarly didn't fit the vision, so we moved those too. It's actually worth noting as we're talking about things that we moved, the client mentioned that they had this beautiful terrace and they weren't happy when they were in their main floors because they felt like there could have been another apartment on top of them. So the design team decided that part of the roof had to go too. So they cut out a giant hole of about 25% of the terrace roof to create an interior garden, which is what you see with that staircase coming down in that rendering there. So on the 21st floor of a 24-story building in the middle of Manhattan, there is an interior garden equipped with a snow melt below all those pavers. It's a pretty cool effect and took a whole lot of work to get through and a lot of structural work. There are 3 separate teams of owners, representatives in this project who had lots of input. We had a bit of a hostile building engineer, I'll say, and board. And the person who owns the floor directly below us, I don't think likes us or the client very much. But some other cool things we did here, and they'll dive into the specifics. We put a pool up here too. It's called a Baja Ledge. It's really more of a giant puddle. But we did get it in there with heating for that. And there's lots of areas for quick plugins of heaters and infrared heaters throughout. And even the pavers on this one are supposed to look like a field of wheat, or so I'm told. And they were custom cut in a non-repeating pattern that actually continues through the interior space, because there's a giant glass door the size of a garage door. I think it's 14 feet by 22 feet that can open up an entire wall when the seasons actually allow for it, to allow for easy transition and create an interior and exterior space for the client. We put a booster system, as I said, into the main system there. There are 3 separate custom fireplaces, I believe 2 gas and 1 alcohol based, with makeup air systems for it, which you can see some, at least in the renderings somewhere here, all the way in the bottom left. And we have 2 commercial grade kitchens in here, even though in New York, you're not really allowed to have 2 kitchens. One of them is actually a pantry. This pantry just has more commercial equipment than most restaurants. So it's been a lot of fun working on this. Again, there's almost nothing we didn't completely change, flip on its head and move. It's really been a lot of work, and it's coming to fruition now. Lots of cool interior details that I can't show. Things like floor to seal copper cladding in some of these walls, giant skylights, and all kinds of wild things. There's a full BMS controlling all aspects of the system, and it's voice activated, kind of like a Star Trek episode where the owner could walk through any room in the house and say, Alexa, make it warmer, and so it will be. I'm going to hand over to my design team to kind of show them so they can go through some of the hoops that we had to jump through to get there. We'll leave time for questions, hopefully, but feel free to chime in if anything seems particularly interesting.
All right, can you hear me?
I think everyone.
Everyone's muted. All right, I'm Heather. I helped out with the electrical design. When I was told I was going before the mechanicals, I was a little shocked because I'm used to following them. So this is a little turn. So like Sam said, we started this project 2019-ish, and I came on board 2020. So a lot of the work that was done was me helping out Mac, and then when he left, I took over more of the CA. So it was a fun first big project, I will say that. And some unique things about it are we have so much power going up to this penthouse that we actually have 2 separate services going on. We brought up an 800 amp service at 3-phase, which was quite a difficult task. We'll kind of touch on that in a little bit. And then we had 5 existing single phase panels that went to the individual apartments that used to make up these floors. And this kind of became an issue, I would say, when people wanted to add in appliances or induction suites that, only worked single phase or only worked 3-phase. And we would have to explain, why we could or couldn't add them to the service. So that's kind of the main systems here. And then Mac worked a lot with the electricians to determine the routing. So like I said, we're going all the way from the basement up to the top of this penthouse. So it's quite a far distance to be traveling. So here in green is kind of the routing that we ended up taking. And you'll see as I kind of go through the plans, the meandering that occurs between floors. And one of the things that had come up was these shafts here are so tight that the Apollo team, the electricians, came back and said, your original feeder sizes are not going to fit. What can we do to make this work? So we had to go back and look at our voltage drop calcs. And we ended up taking 80% of our 800 amp service as our voltage drop number to make that work. So here you can see our first offset happens. Pretty much every floor we're offsetting. And this is our first half floor here. We've got a lot of different consultants that we've worked with in this job. To name a few, we had AV and LV consultants who helped with the rack rooms, any kind of security rooms, UPS backup, the Alexa integration, and they had specific requirements for all of the client-facing receptacles. They need to be USB and or USA and C type, which during submittals was fun because the architects didn't care for the colors that those came in. So there was some back and forth there. But, you know, as you coordinate with all these different people, you're trying to make everybody's wish list items come true, and that's not always possible. So that was one thing we recently dealt with. Some other consultants we worked with were the landscape team, which is ironic for a New York City building, but with all that terrace space, there was landscaping involved. The lighting team, the cinema team, the kitchen team, and the pool team. Those were all groups of people we had to heavily coordinate these spaces with. Speaking of the cinema team, this is our cinema here, and they have this really cool cinema display, which is a bunch of tiled screens that come together and make up one unit. And you can see here, if I CLED, yeah. This is the wall behind the screen, so on the opposite side with all of our power connections, tons of cooling because of all the heat they output. And yeah, it's pretty nicely organized for
a custom built steel support structure, and they had to reinforce the structure beneath it just to hold up the size of this crystal TV. Dedicated cooling system too.
Yeah, we'll talk on that.
And again, you can see our risers coming up that we've offset once again, coming through the middle of this building here. The induction suite I spoke of being an issue on 3-phase versus single phase. That's here in this main pantry, in quotes. We heavily coordinated where specific receptacles would be for Alexa specifically to be plugged in and used. Every room needed to be within earshot of an Alexa. Got another nice meandering path to get up to the electrical room. This is mainly a floor of bedrooms and bathrooms, kind of all in this area. And then we've got another kind of family style kitchen for everyday use. This level includes the pool and the terrace space. Again, this is where we come up with all of our feeders to hit our main distribution panel. This picture doesn't really do it justice, but these are about the size of my arm. So those are some big feeders coming through that I'm sure were not fun to pull. In New York City apartments, you know, tight spaces everywhere and spaces worth a lot. So when you have an area that's not being used, you can bet they're going to find a way to use it. This is a really interesting space because we've got this curved wall behind the stairs. And you kind of come into here and you turn the corner and all of a sudden, you know, there's wires hanging from every which direction. So they definitely made use of the space. And there, this is another spaghetti mess. I like that it's color coded and tagged though. That's nice.
The electrical funhouse look.
This is the main area where all of our main panels are. If you were standing right here looking facing this way, and they've got quite a bit of wiring happening over here. Lots of plug conversions to go from the size wiring and sets that we had to go up the building and then transferring down to what would actually be able to connect to the main breakers. Fun fact about the pool's equipment, they require 240 volt, even though we have 208 volts. So we gave them a transformer. Good. Which is located outdoors here behind the screen. So another item was for vendor hookups. So if they want to have a pool deck party, they wanted to be able to bring in a DJ and speakers and have power to do that. So we gave them 2 spots for those hookup locations. We worked with the landscape team to locate umbrella heaters and other types of warming equipment, I'll call it. This one's pretty fun. I'll let the plumbing team talk more about that, but that's a giant stone shower. So all of the water fixtures got heat traced to them to prevent freezing. I think there's a picture of that coming up.
That's true. I forgot to touch on the boulder. That shower looks like any other exterior shower, provided that that exterior shower looks like a giant boulder that they dug up in Italy and then shipped across an ocean, hauled out to put a shower in, and chopped into 3 pieces to crane 250 feet in the air onto a balcony in New York. Other than that, though, just like any other shower.
There it is. It just looks like a normal rock from this angle, but when you go around it, surprise, there's
Standing
shower.
so you'd only really go a third of the way up.
Yeah. That wall behind it's what, 12 feet tall, right,
Yeah.
Sam?
Maybe taller.
Yeah. 12, 15.
And
Another thing they had was they wanted a lot of locations to have temporary displays. If they wanted to have a presentation or something, they wanted locations to do that. So we provided them with lots of extra power for that. I'll briefly just mention the fire alarm system and then I'll pass it on. A unique thing about this building was that they ended up going with the Vesda system. So that was on another consultant. So all of our main apartment areas were controlled by those Vesda systems. And then any building related areas like fire stairs were on the building system. So Mac had a lot of back and forth with FDNY. Shout out to Mac and Steven from the New York office who helped me do a PAA for my first time. We'll see how that goes. But
still being heard.
So
all right.
Any questions on
Yeah.
that? Well,
Are there any questions or we can save them for the end? That's easier.
all good. Really quickly before Karen and Sam take, I do want to put one more thing on the electrical end. There's a very intricate and elaborate security system with all kinds of facets that go throughout this entire apartment. And other than the fact that we're powering it, we were not allowed to see it in any way. So we spent a good deal of time coordinating and figuring out things that were basically amounted to very little detail other than that it exists and it needs power and we can't touch it or be near it, which was sort of like designing with one eye closed and various things. But we were able to make that happen as well. Nobody can see them except for that they're hidden everywhere.
Yeah.
Go ahead, guys.
questions?
All righty. I will hand it off.
All right. I'll put there so I can do the mouse. Here.
I'll switch to meet together.
No, I think
Let's
you're
do it.
good.
Great, I'm so-
And then I just want to move the camera so it's on you more than me.
Sure.
That did nothing.
That's that. That's probably better. Hi,
Good
everyone.
enough.
Aaron and I will now start with mechanical systems, I think. How does that sound?
Yeah. Thanks, Heather. That was fantastic.
All right.
Start
So
with an overview.
yeah. First, I'll start with the air side system. So this whole building was originally a 4-pipe system, but we wanted to divorce from the building system, so we went with Mitsubishi VRF with heat recovery. Had a bunch of condensers up on a roof, and we tell you there were many other things on this roof, so we added condensers and crammed them in wherever we could. I'll let Karen navigate over to that. And that this is all has to be reviewed by landmarks as well, but I'll get to that a little bit later. We had dedicated dehumidifiers, I believe April Air. This client had voiced concerns about, we want to open things up and then close them. And we were worried that, when they do that, wouldn't be able to recover with humidity. So we added in some dedicated dehumidifiers. We have steam humidifiers, mainly due to artwork and other things like that.
Millwork, artwork.
Oh, yeah.
So about 2 dehumidifiers per floor, about 1 steam humidifier per zone. And then just to touch upon this roof plan up here, there's a lot going on this roof. A lot of this is building systems. We have a building generator, building chiller system, cooling tower, not chiller system, a massive skylight. And then we also have our VRF Mitsubishi condensing units, which we had to coordinate with the building themselves, TOB, landmarks, and such.
The whole gamut.
Yep. The fireplace flues also go up there,
Forgot
and the
about
air
that.
pressurization fans.
Elevator ventilation, among other things.
So then that was on the outside. On the inside, we actually have, a mix of off-the-shelf grills as well as custom grills. We try to avoid custom grills wherever we can because, you can't predict what they do, but, aesthetics drive a lot of decisions on these jobs. So we will work with architects when they want to do custom grills. And these are it's just wood routed out in the shape of grills, and then they paint it and put whatever other finishes they want on it. So kind of tricky. They don't always do what you want them to do. So there's always some tweaking to be involved there. We had a makeup air system that was heating only for the fireplaces. And that actually came in through that sunken garden that we made. Kind of an interesting system there. And then as you can see in the picture to the right, it is just absolutely crammed into this hallway ceiling.
There's a fan, a couple coils in there, some piping, some ductwork.
Yeah.
Can't really tell what's going on though, because there's so much, but that's all happening right here.
Dare I say the word system effect, but it's not what we were going for. So do you want to move on to the water side?
Yeah.
Okay. So for the water side systems, we have once again, we've decided to divorce completely from the building boiler. So we've brought 3 condensing boilers of our own into the mix, and those are going to be up on a bulkhead kind of towards the roof plans. And it's New York, so of course we have, a separate boiler filing that we have to do.
Yes, for DOB filings, we have to do a separate mechanical set, plumbing set, and now a boiler set as well.
Yep.
Also, fire protection, electrical.
So these boilers serve all sorts of different loads, but we'll start far left. That would be the pool and spa heat exchangers. We worked with the pool consultant to, size and get those just right. From there, we move over to a heat exchanger with a 50% glycol loop, and that serves both the makeup air as well as the snow melt that's in that sunken garden. And yes, that snow melt system is a thermohex system, which are plastic panels that sit underneath your pavers. And we went with those because they're the only thing we could get to fit based on the layup of the pavers and whatnot. So a lot of coordination there. I will warn, if you work with thermohex, it's kind of hard to get info, but they will get it to you eventually. And we found on our system, the pressure drop was pretty high. So all things you had to kind of work out in CA, which were a little bit difficult. As we keep moving on, we've got our 2 radiant floor mixing stations. Some more simple residences, we might just do 1, but here, there was delineation between wood floors and stone floors, and there was a ton of them. So we said separate mixing stations, we could get the different temperatures we wanted to both. I find that's the best practice when you have big differences in floor types.
Yeah. Among other floor types, so we kind of group them into 2. There's epoxy, there's tile, there's other sorts of weird surfaces. So
I think there's a leather floor somewhere in this job. I forget where that was, but it's in like a stair hall or something. Interesting.
Very unique situation.
And that is
3
pretty much our whole boiler system.
I can jump to show them on the valves.
Yeah.
We kind of created our own mechanical room on the 22nd floor terrace area. It's a little hard to see here, but it's jam-packed. We have very high ceilings. lots of electrical equipment in here as well.
It's 14-foot space, right?
Yeah.
So it's basically just stacking everything on the walls, and you know, whoever needs to get to it will probably need a ladder. But we worked it all out with the contractor. It fits. It works.
100 pounds of stuff in a 50-pound box. So
Oh, yep, absolutely.
definitely a little challenging there.
We also have, so I'll make note that the 19th floor, we actually have half the floor being served by the building system still, and then the other half being served by our boiler.
Yeah. So you want to go into the reasonings why this is a little bit different, 19A versus 19B?
Sure. So 19A was really just bought later on the project so that we could make riser offsets with building chilled water risers, building condensing water risers, ductwork, all sorts of things. And then now it's basically just guest rooms, I think, for when they have people over. So what we decided to do is keep it on the building systems because they're less important. And we kept anything client facing will be on our divorce systems for the sake of simplicity.
So just to highlight that, he bought a $3 million apartment for the purpose of relocating some building routing.
We were happy he did it. We were all for it when it happened because
Helped out a lot.
up until then we were really fighting against ceiling heights after, jacking up the slab to try and make offsets below it, which the building didn't even like to begin with. So
Right.
difficult things there.
Do you want to talk about a little bit of the permitting process, building landmarks, DOB,
Sure.
local law?
So for the New York office, this is definitely familiar stuff, but for anyone else that hasn't worked in New York, there's, various agencies that you have to go through to get permits, and it's not as simple as, some other places. So one of the biggest ones that we had to deal with was the building itself, which is the building engineer, and there's a building architect too. So all your plans have to get reviewed, approved, scrutinized by them. And on this job, they were heavily scrutinized, including my gas calculations, which I may talk about later, but I'll try not to rant about. Then you go to landmarks, which is a process where you have to show all changes you make to the exterior of the building. And if any of them are objectionable to the landmarks committee, they'll reject it. Once you get through the landmarks committee, then they open it up to the public. So your neighbors can complain for, a month, something like that. And then finally, if you get approval from them, they'll let you do things to your building, but it can take some time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One more thing that's worth noting on the building approval is that the building was renovated from a manufacturing kind of storehouse facility like 2013. And when we got the building, there was an interim board in. So mid-project, the board changed while we were in the midst of design, and it was a whole lot of fun because we basically had to redo everything we already did and get more approval.
All right, so next we'll move on to some of the consultants we had to coordinate with, one of which was that AV consultant. So for that, well, actually, I think there was a separate cinema consultant too, but AV and cinema kind of all looped into the same. So we had this giant CLED screen, and we needed a 3-ton unit just to cool the front and back side of the screen, which you'll see kind of crammed into a closet just to this page south of that screen.
You're going down the floor, so you can't even see it. This is just the ductwork risers, and it's feeding behind and in front of the screen just for the heat output from the screen. Then we have a separate system serving the actual cinema.
The head end equipment's on the other side, and we serve, I think that's 2 tons over there. So five total for this cinema, basically.
Well, there's three individual systems, one for the CLED TV, one for the back end equipment, and then one serving the cinema itself where people are located. So 3 separate systems at the same time.
Yep. They like to fight each other, and will continue to, but it's never hot in there. So it's always good.
Yeah.
We also worked with a kitchen consultant. Sam touched on it briefly, but commercial level equipment in the something pantry?
There's the family kitchen, and then the pantry, which is up a level or down a level. Up.
Yep. Down levels.
That's the
main pantry. So this will actually seem somewhat familiar to the commercial teams because they gave us a connection schedule and everything for this kitchen. Usually residential, it's just, here's the stove, we're going to use this. Here they actually sent us the full connection schedule with indirect drains and all that fun stuff that we had to deal with.
Large kitchen exhaust.
Mm-hmm.
The makeup air, we did actually stick to the building. We have VAV boxes tied to building outside air. So we did tap off of that building riser. which is a little unique.
And then we're monitoring it with our BMS so that if it ever does, drop below a certain temperature and the air's coming out too humid, we'll shut it down immediately. Just deal without the makeup air because it's, probably better to not have any if it's going to be just pulling in, terrible humid air.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, the OA is actually provided by 4 Aon units by the building on the 21st floor, which should be fine. But again, a lot of this team was the same guys from 432 Park, so we know if they raise their chill water temperature the second they do it, before anybody can complain.
Yep.
Talk about the difficulty we had with structure and structural penetrations and getting around beams.
So through the mechanical and plumbing, you'll see lots of little keynotes, some of which are calling out penetrations through the structure, which you had to do in various places. So pretty much every room here was a fight against inches or, a battle between our mechanical space and then the architect's space that they'd like to design. So you'll notice lots of through structure penetrations. So we had to coordinate all those with Silman. They were very helpful in the whole process. Help keep it go smooth with us. And, we did end up getting a bunch of those in and keep the ceilings high. And the ceilings had to be high because they had these arched windows that would go up to a certain height. So you can't bring the ceiling below the top of that arch. Otherwise, I get it. The look is just off. So we were really boxed in with our system. So you'll see a lot of the systems kind of hang to the edges of the room so we can take advantage of soffits and things like that.
Yeah, the client had originally purchased it with the giant ceilings, right? But there were console units on the 4-pipe end, really loud ones that were originally serving these areas that obviously weren't going to work for our design. So we really had to work through on how we were going to squeeze everything in these ceilings.
So we had some special requirements on this job with different room types, but one of them was that the master bedroom they wanted to keep down at 66 degrees at night. So we put in a separate booster system that would be able to achieve that. So the BMS will turn that on, a little bit before bedtime, cool the room down and turn off, or continue to turn on if it needs to overnight. But that was one of the extra special requests that we had here.
And that's our only train unit.
Yep, that's the only. It's just a regular split 2-ton, I think.
Yeah, so it's working in tandem with the Mitsubishi Vera that's already serving space. So we have two separate
systems.
Yep. Units serving space. Little quick picture here, just the finishes and
you can see those nice arched windows. We get the ceiling, right up to the top of those without going below it where we could.
Very meticulous soffits.
Yep, all over the place. There's ductwork in all of them.
Yeah.
Other special rooms we had were a sauna, a yoga room. We had a gym, which had a crazy isolated slab. It's actually on the lowest floor that they own. So underneath it is someone else's space. So it's like the whole slab is floating there. There's tons of fine artwork all over the building. Those 2 kitchens we talked about. There was, a lot of special considerations taken in various spaces throughout the building.
You can just switch over to a couple of photos, just kind of showing the level of complexity and the amount of stuff we're putting in our ceilings and very small access panel. So up at the top, that's actually a dehumidifier. Accessing that is not going to be fun post-construction, but the client did agree to smaller access panels, knowing that the ceilings or walls would need to be cut open if any emergencies happened. But this is a lot of the building ductwork, the kitchen exhaust, bath exhaust, all of it needed to be offset and it needed to be wrapped in 1.5 inches of fire wrap. So this was extremely challenging to route through throughout the different floors, just because the ducts were so big to begin with, and then we also had to add the fire wrap
just to maintain those fire ratings in the egress hallways.
Right. Some more piping.
Here's that awesome freestanding staircase that goes between floors. I think that's between the 21st and 22nd. Really cool. Every piece is welded with plate steel all the way up. Pipe access panels.
Supposedly an access panel. There's lights coming off of this. There's a lot of stuff happening in a very small area. I don't want to be the service people.
I think you'd only have to break the filter into 12 pieces to get it out of there.
Yeah, most of them are 2 pieces per filter.
Yeah.
Here's another shot of kind of looking down.
That might be the sunken garden before they were made.
Yeah.
Not sure.
And then this is the sunken garden once the roof actually came off.
This was a tough site to walk through too when they were first like demoing and doing structure work, because you really had to like, watch your step. They did have nets up and everything, but it was very treacherous, I think, to say the least. You had to, you know, hard hats on, walk carefully, keep your head on a swivel, because there's just so much going on and so much steel moving around that you really needed to be careful. It was kind of daunting.
Yeah. One other thing that's worth noting here, the sheer amount of stuff and steel they had to move up here, they put a semi-permanent gantry crane on the sidewalk outside this building for a period of about 8 months just to get the material in and out of the site in any kind of reasonable fashion. Otherwise, the construction schedule probably would have got pushed out another year and a half. As it is, only working from 8 to 4, it's been tight.
No overtime.
Oh yeah, New York City work.
One more thing on the mechanical, we definitely want to give a special shout out to the New York office, because they helped a lot with the new local law. Was it local law
Among
97?
among other things,
Yeah.
they helped us with a lot of little things here and there. I know Vin helped us out with local law. Pete helped us out with Donnie and fielding some questions. We had a lot of different guys from the New York City office go to the site for us. We were there almost every other week ourselves, but sometimes
Sure.
you just need somebody boots on the ground, and so we did.
We need someone here today. They were helping
Yeah.
out with that, so we do appreciate it.
Racho, John, among other people who I'm forgetting. It's been 5 years, so thank you for that. This is just a quick little photo of the building piping offsets. Most of the pipes were 8 inches themselves, and then they had significant insulation around them. So I think the exterior dimension of that was what, 16 or something, 14,
Yep,
16
about
inches.
16 inches. That was
Yeah,
directly
that's it.
over the client's kitchen too. So hiding those was all but impossible, but we managed something to be able to hide those in the ceiling and make it look like they were never there.
I don't really
And we
talk
could-
too much about this.
Right. And we convinced the building to let us take their entire cooling system offline with a fingers crossed that we were going to get back on in time.
Yeah,
They loved it.
We also had to provide a bypass at the top of these risers too, because we were taking so much load off of the building's, original systems. They wanted a bypass put in so that they could, account for it. And that was there was a lot of pointing fingers of who should own it and what should happen there.
Well, that's because the building's existing system didn't include variable speed pumps for their main building risers for some reason.
Glad we're away from that one.
you want to show you? Oh, you want to talk about the elevator versus DOB numbers? That was
Oh yeah, that one's
a
always
funny
fun.
one.
So I'm sure other people who work in New York have dealt with this before, but when you first start a job that's in like a taller building, what may happen is you refer to a floor as a certain number, and someone else thinks you're talking about another one because there's DOB numbers, and then which is like the actual floor of the building, and there's also marketing floors, which are
Elevators.
the elevator buttons. So all the time you'd be talking with the architect, the contractor, and say, oh, the 19th floor. And like, okay, well, which 19th floor? The elevator button or the DOB number?
And why do they do that?
The 13th floor. They want to make the building sound taller than it is. I
Yeah.
couldn't really
Yeah.
tell you.
Well,
It's a marketing
Yeah.
gimmick
The-
to make
the
you
13th.
feel like you're on a higher floor.
Yeah.
But it makes for
Oh,
interesting
New York City.
exchanges occasionally when things get. It's just a confusing thing you have to wrap your head around.
So are there any questions before we keep going on the mechanical side and eventually we can switch to plumbing?
Yeah.
And a quick question for you guys. Ms. Shuley mentioned and Dunwoody mentioned also divorcing from the buildings systems. Do you guys have to get like approval to do that? Or are there any?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So
The building.
it's approval from the building. I mean, the DOB and nobody else over there really cares, but the building engineer, I think has made a lot of money on this project. He treated the whole thing as a third-party review. Normally, building engineers wouldn't care if I was giving them a bunch of their own capacity back, but this guy was a very in-depth reviewer. So yeah, we had to get a bunch of approval for it, but the hardest parts to get the approval for, like I said, were things that affected building systems. We moved like a dozen plumbing risers around, the storm risers around, combined secondary into the main storms, and had to approve the calcs, getting the gas up, the electrical, disconnecting the heating system, the gas system, and the cooling towers. Those were the ones that had them the most angry. And again, because the board switched midway through, we got approval, and then we had to get approval again, and then it was challenged. Oh, they also weren't loving the cutout part of the roof thing either.
Yeah, the snow melt was mandatory. Like it was non-negotiable, so that those drains could never get iced up, basically.
Yeah, as was the waterproofing, intense waterproofing for every single floor. But yeah, a lot of approval processes again, and this was all after multiple rounds of owners reps. But on the actual, we'll say bureaucratic side, no. I mean, you still have to submit to proving you're that you're heating it and so forth, but they don't really care. And our systems are more efficient than what's in there, so it's better for the building in general.
Yep, the local law stuff.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Switch over.
I do realize I didn't touch on the BMS system, so I'll talk about that really quick. But the main driver for the system that was chosen was because control of the HVAC system via Alexa was a mandatory requirement. So we worked with a couple different providers to try and figure out who could manage that and how. And they ended up with ABB as the DDC system. And then that's, it was that system, which then talked to another controller. I could try and find the hierarchy diagram if anyone wants to see that, but it was pretty complicated process to get that to work. But kind of cool. At the end of the day, that you can just walk into a room and say, Alexa, turn the temperature up. Alexa, turn the temperature down. It does it through all these various systems.
Yeah. Branding Controls is the BMS contractor, and they've been great. The whole design team over there is a bit of an A team. Silver Linings is the GC, Donato's the plumber, Apollo's the electric, and Comfort Air is the mechanical. For those of you working in New York, in my opinion, those are pretty much the top end guys you could talk to for the various trades.
And the final product is coming out really nice, I think, from all the site visits I've had.
Before we switch to plumbing, to touch upon a little bit of photos.
So these are those Wheatstone pavers with the non-repeating patterns. I was talking to the GC on one of my last visits, and he said they're constantly battling breaking the corners of these because there's those super sharp corners on them. And then I don't think this is the stuff in the sunken garden, but the one in the sunken garden actually has that thermohex laid up underneath it too.
Right. And then just some photos from the roof and different windows in the
Madison Square
top
Park, I love.
Yeah, pretty good views.
This cloudy day.
I know. Of course, it was raining. I took these photos, but very moody. All right, and then we can switch to.
So I'd say on the plumbing side, one of our biggest challenges was the natural gas service, coordinating all of that. So we added those new boilers on top of the building's boilers that are already there because we wanted our own. And in order to do that, we had to tap into the building's house riser, which served their boilers, dryers, anything that was like the building's, house loads that was all paid for and bought by the building. So we had to have that monitored as well as approved by the building. And that took quite a while because I had to bring my gas counts that the pressure would still be adequate at all their existing equipment to the building and have them approve them. And there was definitely some back and forth on that, but thank you, Dell, for helping me out with that. We were able to get that through the finish line and they approved it. And then after the building, we then went to Con Ed and they had approved that all of the meters, regulators were sized for the amount of gas that we'd be pulling to. So it was no small feat to be able to get all this gas up to that top of roof room with boilers in it for us to be able to use.
Yeah.
The other risers were similar problems, but a little bit easier because we were actually reducing the load on a lot of those. Yeah. But basically, you just have to prove to your building that I'm not going to use any more gas than we originally used in the old plans for the apartment. That's what we were able to do. Even with adding fireplaces, heaters. One of the fireplaces is actually an alcohol fireplace, and that's mostly because we couldn't get additional gas to it. Just wasn't allowed by the building.
Right. We actually brought in, or the contractors brought in, a gas consultant, which is a job that I didn't know actually existed. But he was able to, he used to work, I think, for Con Ed, and he was able to smooth over some of these things. But the gas load is pretty massive, obviously, for the boilers, the fireplaces, and for the large kitchen range there.
We also had there's those shut-off valves too with the gas. So we had to, in order to coordinate all stuff, there were shutdowns of the building that had to occur. And we were hoping, and Donato had thought that there were valves on, like, I think it was the 17th floor. Yep. And then when they went to go look for them, they weren't there. So they did, in fact, need to shut down all of the building's gas for or the majority of the building's gas for a short amount of time, so they can make the switch over. And that was, another challenge we had to deal with, work through, provide temporary hot water through the electrical system. So thank you, Heather. Appreciate your help us out with that.
Yeah, 4 120 electric water heaters. They're massive.
Crazy electrical
Yeah.
draw too on all of them.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
it
Just
turned
yeah.
on.
To clarify, yeah, we shut down the entire building's gas, which they weren't very happy about, which meant they had no domestic hot water for half of the building. So we had to on the fly kind of bring in enough temporary hot water to serve 14 floors of apartments.
Yeah,
Which we
we ended
did.
up pushing the transition from temp power to the actual service ahead in the schedule so that we could do that.
On domestic water and kind of
Yeah, so
we had there.
on this job, the domestic water runs are pretty challenging because all the original locations of the risers were not what the architect wanted with their new vision. So we had to move them all on those additional floors on the bottom. And one of the other wrinkles that we ran into as we kind of worked through the job was that the hot water system was shown as bottom fed, right?
Yep.
In the DOB approved drawings. But at some point during construction, they had decided to flip it to top fed. So we had to very quickly reconfigure our drawings to show it being fed from the other direction once we found out this change, which was, obviously late in the game. We'd already gotten DOB approval, then had to go back and approved again.
Update our drawing.
Yes.
Work with Donato.
Yeah, this was post demo. This was during construction. And just to focus a bit on this riser move, anybody who's ever read an alterations agreement, certainly in New York City, knows that they vary widely. But the one thing they all say is thou shalt never move any building system riser for any reason under, intense penalties. And we moved every single one.
Yeah, so this, what you're looking at right now, is half of the domestic riser. So if we switch pages here, you'll see the other half. And that just kind of shows the extent of this one apartment. This is all the domestic water, both cold and hot.
Then you can see all the existing ties existing along the bottom. So there's a bunch of those that we had to tie into, offset, combine together, bring up to the top, and bring back down.
Right. Gymnastics.
Very complicated.
And then we can switch over to sanitary and vent, which normally you wouldn't think is a problem, but in this particular apartment, it was challenging. And it was mostly challenging because the sanitary was fed from, the sanitary piping is on the floor below. So you have to access the apartment below in order to move it. And that's fine for the 20th floor and up, but on the 19th floor, that becomes a problem. It actually was a problem on the 20th floor, and that's why
they bought 19th, yeah.
The 19th floor, because it was much more of a back of house space. On the client facing space on the 19th floor, all of our sanitary piping had to be above the floor buildup, above the structure. So there was a lot of challenges in design and coordination in the field with the contractors about how to accomplish that. It was actually much more difficult than we anticipated. Just slowed back into the plumbing risers. So
definitely. There's really large floor buildups on the 19th floor, which, then you're pushing the floor up. Now it's pushing the height of the room. So the ceilings would go up to match it. And then, it's at the cost of ductwork and other things. So kind of just one problem pushing into another. It involves a very high level of coordination between the trades.
Yeah. And again, this is only half.
Hence why it's me and Karen presenting this, because we both worked, I'd say, on both things a lot. It wasn't
endless coordination.
It wasn't like, one person doing plumbing, one person doing mechanical. It was just wherever the help was needed, we adapted and just got it done.
Speaking of coordination, storm piping was a huge challenge on this project because all the storm pipe needs to be sloped across a ceiling that has no room. We also like to add 1 inch of insulation around it to make sure there's no condensation on the piping. So we ended up choosing a different route here. Instead of doing separate feeds down for primary and secondary, we ended up combining them, which increased our riser size to 6 inches, which is very large to try to then pipe through a building that has 0 space left over. So there was a lot of coordination with the structural engineer. I don't even want to know how much time coordinating penetrations through beams down to, 1/4 of an inch, which is absolutely wild. On a project of this scale, it's very hard
Yeah,
to
yeah.
accomplish that.
Hundreds of those, the time adds up quick and it
Yeah.
becomes daunting.
But we did it, and all of the storm is in place now and is functional.
I don't even know if I could put a number to the actual number of structural penetrations, but it was probably
Oh, and now see them.
probably 100.
On the client side, you can't see any of those drains, which was important to the architect. They're all hidden below that field of wheat paver system. Probably horrible to actually get at the service, but they're all completely hidden, which is nice.
Acoustics was also a challenge on this project, both from a plumbing point of view and a mechanical point of view as well. Made sure that we had acoustical engineer review all of our details, reviewed how all the piping was being hung, how every piece of equipment was vibrationally isolated, and the velocity and noise of the airflow through all of our ducts and grills. So that was.
And the particularly tricky part about this acoustical engineer too is they, you know, a lot of them do this, but they don't give you like a set of drawings or anything to follow. It's just basically a report. So then all those changes get picked up in our drawings. So you have to change it, you know, in your specs, in your details, drawings. Took quite a bit of time coordinating all those things because we knew it was really important on this job. So, you know, and then once it starts getting installed, it's also on us, since it's in our drawings now, to make sure that it's being installed. So a couple times we walked through and noticed, you know, piping just clamped rigid to studs. And, you know, in those cases, we had to say something and make sure it's in a report, follow up to make sure they actually addressed it after. And after some back and forth, you know, they did start installing all these things. They said the previous connections were temporary.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We'll jump to some photos and then we can switch to sprinklers to end it off. So again, just level of coordination, the amount of piping in the ceiling was something like we've never seen before. Also, we just wanted to touch upon some of the finishes. They're very unique.
There's that epoxy floor.
Lots of epoxy colored floors. I don't know if it's really my aesthetic, but you know, it's something.
It's interesting to say the least.
Marble walls, and this is just a bathroom, by the way. Marble walls in the bathroom makes me a little dizzy, but you know, each his own. And then as they're touched upon earlier, this is that boulder shower. You can't see it, it's on the other side, but you know, this is a probably 15-foot wall, 12
yeah,
15-foot wall.
And the supply piping is actually drilled into the middle of that rock and kind of comes out the other side. So it's pretty interesting, kind of a cool concept. I definitely haven't seen anything like that before. And
yeah,
I'm sure it was a lot of work to get it up there.
Just some more pictures of the amount of.
There's that gas shutoff valve that was cut into the basement. That was going to be cut in a later date so that they could reduce the time of the shutdowns. So you can isolate one side of the system. Oh yeah, there's that plumbing installation.
Yeah, just a lot of stuff happening in a small space. And then we can switch over to quickly just talk about sprinklers,
sure.
Talk about lot line sprinklers and the sauna.
So this shop had a pretty typical sprinkler system for a New York City building, NFPA 13, standard rules apply, you know, nothing fancy there. I'd say the really interesting pieces to it were special sprinkler heads needed at skylights, saunas, you know, your higher temp rated sprinklers, the kitchens. And then also we had lot line sprinklers along, I think is it that page south side of it? Yeah. And what that is basically certain buildings in New York, you need to maintain a fire rating at your windows. So you could go and get fire rated glazing, which from what I hear from architects looks really bad and is expensive as well. Or you can put these lot line sprinklers, and what those do is spray a curtain of water across that window so that when there's a fire on the other side of it, it won't break the window and get through. That's basically the premise of it. And there's very specific rules. If you ever want to, you know, do some light reading, take a look at NFPA 13. I think maybe New York has a special section on it as well. Dale could direct you to it, I bet.
Oh, yes, I'm sure. So we have about 5 minutes left. We can continue talking, but I want to stop and see if anyone has any questions.
They're speechless.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, the sprinkler system, other than the lot lines and the fact that we had to put a whole new sprinkler system in and then a whole separate temporary system at a much slower height because the construction process took so long. When it's over a year, I believe in New York, you have to do that. But when it's 4 stories, it can be a bit of a chore. But we were able to feed off the building system. The sprinkler system is the most basic system in this apartment, where we were able to do it off the existing fire pump and all those kind of things. So it wasn't too bad other than the fact that we had to coordinate the entire temporary system below everything so they could then remove it and so on.
The obstructions were tough on this job with all those beam pockets and soffits. Like, obstruction rules were, I had that section open for weeks at a time trying to work through that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say
Yeah.
I tried to, but I don't know if I
Yeah, go ahead.
Quick question, did I hear 140 million high end for 23,000 square feet?
23,000 square feet plus the terrace, which is 4,500. So I'm ballparking here. It was about 60 or so when they bought the main chunk of it, and then they bought another half a floor, which was several million, and then the design fee. They should be kicking in around $140 million. And I'm not even sure that counts for like the furnishings themselves. I'd have to look.
I don't think so.
But yeah,
That was just the construction fee, Sam, the 70 million.
yeah. So that's not even counting, the
Finishes.
actual furnishings, the furniture and all that kind of stuff. I mean, some of the finishes are in there, but
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
the client can afford it. But again, they have several homes. There'll be a permanent live-in staff, obviously. On the 19th floor, they have a little control room. But the actual control devices that you see in the client spaces are literally just a very simple toggle switch that moves temperature up and down that they spent a year and a half picking out the color of.
prototyping and mocking up. Yeah, it was a whole.
It was great.
It was called a Black Nova something.
Yeah, it's the Black
was it.
Nova
It's like-
something,
it's like this
but
big.
again, it was similar in a lot of the residential projects. Everything had to be reviewed by 16 different people, the interior designer. The client is extremely busy. So actually getting a hold of them to meet with them is very rare. And just the sheer quantity. The client themselves builds so many homes and so forth. They have their own owner's rep team, not like one they hire. Like they had a personal
It's
owner's rep
in-house.
team for all their construction projects. And then there were 2 other separate owners reps teams, all kinds of parameters and standards we were following and multi-layers of review from everybody involved. It's been a bear. But a lot of cool things going in there, and the finishes really are going to be wild. And it's cool to say that we did some of the things that we did get to do in this project. Although
I
living
wouldn't
at the
recommend
time.
all them to our future clients, some of the items. With how
Yeah.
much work, but it can be done.
Yep.
Like ever building and filling.
Yeah.
Anything else? Anybody?
Well,
Thank you Thank you
Sure.
for sharing. What a great introduction to, a very small project. And I can tell that everyone's very proud of, and you guys should be of it. I'm glad we have it on something that we can't talk about on our marketing, but it's good. At least we can talk about it inside, and great presentation all.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks.
Appreciate everyone's time listening, and anything that I talked about here, if you have any questions about it for anyone else out there, feel free to come ask, email, call, whatever.
We're around.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, guys.